Denver, late October, rain still clinging to the asphalt like a bad memory. Unit 15 tiers south on I-25, lights carving red-blue wounds through the darkness, siren howling over the city's indifferent hum. When the ambulance finally skids to a stop beside the guardrail, veteran paramedic Sean Patrick Donnelly steps into the strobing chaos and, for the first time in 16 years, feels the ground tilt beneath him. There, kneeling on the wet grass beside a Honda Civic crushed almost flat, hands outstretched in silent protection, is a woman clothed in a deep blue mantle over a white robe that seems to carry its own soft light. Her face holds a peace so complete it hurts to look at, as though every sorrow the highway has ever witnessed has been gathered into her gaze and transformed into mercy. Sean blinks once, just once, and she is gone. Police body cams, dash cams, the firefighter's helmet footage, nothing. Only empty grass swaying in the wind. Yet inside that twisted metal tomb, a young woman who should have been dead a dozen times over is still breathing. And the man who buried his heart 5 years ago on this same stretch of road is about to discover that some walls are not meant to stand forever. Before we continue, share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Let's see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary have reached. And if you haven't yet joined our family, subscribe now, because here, each day, we witness the tender love and mighty power of the Mother of God. Sean Patrick Donnelly had become the quiet legend of Denver Fire and EMS, the one everyone wanted on their worst calls, because when he arrived, the panic subsided and the work simply got done. At 39, with 16 years of blood under his belt, he could walk into a 4-alarm cardiac arrest or a multi-victim shooting and lower the temperature of the entire scene just by stepping out of the rig. Rookies stopped vomiting when they saw his calm eyes. Even the cops, who joked about everything, lowered their voices when Sean took charge. He moved like a man who had seen the bottom of the abyss and decided it could not touch him again. Most people assumed he had always been that way. Cold, precise, unbreakable. Only Catherine, his wife of 12 years, knew the exact moment the light went out inside him 0.5 years earlier. Sean had been the heartbeat of every shift. He laughed loud enough to echo down hospital corridors, slapped backs after brutal calls, bought rounds at the Irish pub on Colfax until the bartender threatened to cut him off. His partner then was Liam O'Connor, 28, newly married, the kind of man who carried ultrasound photos in his wallet and had already picked out bedtime stories for the daughter his wife Siobhan was carrying. They finished each other's sentences, knew exactly how the other liked his coffee on the midnight run, trusted each other with their lives 100 times a shift. Then came a rainy Tuesday in November, a call so routine it barely registered. Single vehicle collision, driver ambulatory, possible neck injury. Sean was fitting the cervical collar when Liam crossed the highway for the backboard. The oncoming truck hydroplaned on the wet leaves. Sean heard the impact before he saw it, a sickening crunch that tore the night in half. He ran, slipped in blood that was already cooling, pressed both hands against arteries that refused to close, screamed Liam's name into a face that would never answer again. At the funeral, Siobhan, 8 months pregnant, eyes hollowed by grief, hugged him and whispered, "It wasn't your fault, Sean. You did everything." He heard the words, but they slid off the new armor forming around his heart like rain off windshield glass. He went back to work the next week, because stopping felt like dying too. The jokes stopped. The beers after shift stopped. The stories about the calls that hurt stopped. Catherine begged him to talk to the chaplain, to the department counselor, to anyone. He answered the same every time, voice flat as the monitors he watched all night. "I'm fine." At home, they moved like polite roommates sharing the same quiet house. Saturdays became grocery lists and folded laundry in silence. Sundays were lunch with Catherine's mother, small talk about the weather and new recipes while Sean stared at his plate and counted the seconds until he could leave. Everything in its place, nothing allowed to hurt him again. because order was the only thing keeping the grief from swallowing him whole. Catherine still slipped out every Sunday morning to St. Elizabeth of Hungary, the little brick church near their house, lighting candles for Liam, for Siobhan, for the husband who used to hold her hand during the Our Father and now lay awake staring at the ceiling until the alarm forced him back into the rig. She never pushed, never demanded answers. She simply prayed, the way generations of Irish women have prayed when the men they love build fortresses too high for words to climb. Sean told himself faith was for people who had never held their best friend's life as it poured out between their fingers on cold asphalt. Science was cleaner, medicine measurable. You intubated or you didn't. You pushed AP or you didn't. The heart restarted or it didn't. And the universe kept its promises. He wore his skepticism like the same faded station jacket every shift, convinced it protected him better than anything else ever could. Until the night the highway reached up and handed him something no protocol could explain, something that slipped through every crack in the walls he had spent half a decade building, and began, gently but relentlessly, to pull them down, brick by silent brick. The call came in at 10:40 p.m., the dispatcher's voice clipped and urgent. Rollover with entrapment, possible ejection, fire en route. Sean Patrick Donnelly grabbed the mic out of habit. Unit 15 en route, ETA 7. Erin Gallagher, 5 months on the job, still counting her calls in double digits, flipped on the lights and siren and punched the ambulance through downtown traffic like someone who still believed speed could outrun death. Rain streaked the windshield in silver threads, the wipers keeping a frantic rhythm that matched the pulse in Sean's temples. Neither of them spoke. They never needed to anymore. They found the Honda 20 meters off the roadway, upside down in the grass median, roof crushed almost to the seats, glass glittering across the asphalt like scattered ice. Blue and red lights painted the wreckage in violent pulses. 2 patrol officers stood with flashlights sweeping the scene, faces pale under the brims of their hats. Firefighters were still rolling up from the opposite direction. Sean was out before Erin brought the rig to a complete stop, boots hitting wet pavement, trauma bag already slung across his body. He moved down the slight embankment with the single-minded focus he had perfected over years of refusing to feel anything at all. And then he saw her, kneeling on the driver's side, no more than 3 feet from the crumpled door, was a woman in a mantle of deepest blue, the color of midnight just before dawn. Beneath it, a robe of pure white caught the strobing lights and somehow softened them, as though the fabric itself refused to be harsh. Her dark hair fell in gentle waves over her shoulders, framing a face so serene it seemed to hush the very sirens. Her hands were extended toward the car, palms forward, fingers slightly apart, not touching the metal, yet somehow holding everything together. A faint radiance hovered around her, not from the emergency lights, not from the moon hidden behind clouds, but from within, like candlelight seen through alabaster. Sean's training took over first. "Ma'am, step back from the vehicle. Fuel leak risk, move now." His voice cracked across the night louder than he intended. The woman did not flinch, did not turn, did not acknowledge him at all. She remained perfectly still, as if the chaos around her existed in another dimension entirely. He took 3 urgent strides forward. "Ma'am, I need you clear of the scene immediately." Erin was coming down the slope behind him, backboard clattering against her hip. "Sean, what?" He spun toward her for half a second, just long enough to shout, "Civilian by the driver door, get her back." When he whipped his head around again, the grass was empty. No footsteps in the mud, no swirl of mantle in the wind. Nothing but the wrecked car and the smell of gasoline thick in the air. Erin reached his side, breathing hard. "Where's the civilian?" Sean opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. She was right here." He swept his headlamp across the ground. The beam cut clean arcs through the darkness, revealing only trampled grass and broken glass. The nearest patrol officer jogged over. "Problem." Sean's voice came out rough. Female, blue cloak, kneeling right here 30 seconds ago. The officer frowned, clicked his radio. Any units report a bystander on scene? Static, then a chorus of negatives. Body cam review later would show nothing but empty space where Sean swore a woman had been praying. Before we continue, share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Let's see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary have reached. And if you haven't yet joined our family, subscribe now, because here, each day, we witness the tender love and mighty power of the Mother of God. Sean forced himself back to protocol. He dropped to his knees, shone his light through the shattered window, and felt his breath leave him a second time. Inside, hanging upside down by her seatbelt, was a young woman, early 20s, blonde hair matted with blood, unconscious but breathing, shallow, ragged but breathing. With that degree of crush, the roof should have pancaked straight through the passenger compartment. By every law Sean had ever memorized, she should have been gone before the first unit arrived. Live victim, he shouted, voice raw. Female, 20s, unresponsive but airway intact. The next 32 minutes blurred into the controlled violence of extrication. Jaws of life screaming, metal peeling back like tin, firefighters bracing the frame while Sean crawled halfway inside the cockpit, collaring the cervical spine, starting lines, whispering the same calm nonsense he always used when someone was too hurt to hear him anyway. But the whole time, in the back of his skull, a single image burned. Blue mantle, outstretched hands, impossible peace. They got her out alive. At the hospital, Dr. Elena Vargas took one look at the wreck photos on Sean's phone and shook her head. Fractured ribs, concussion, compound radius, but neurologically intact. I've seen less damage kill people instantly. She had someone watching over her tonight. Sean met the doctor's eyes and felt the floor tilt again to eye in the ambulance bay afterward. Rain still falling soft and steady. He stood with his hands braced on the cold hood and tried to breathe around the sudden weight in his chest. Aaron watched him for a long moment, then spoke quietly. You saw something back there, didn't you? He couldn't answer. He only stared at the puddles reflecting red blue, and wondered why the night suddenly smelled faintly, impossibly, of roses. The house on East 12th Avenue was quiet when Sean finally walked through the door a little after 3 in the morning, the kind of quiet that only exists when someone is pretending to sleep so the other person doesn't have to talk. He moved through the familiar rooms like a ghost. Boots left neatly by the mat. Jacket hung with mechanical precision. The soft click of the coffee maker he started for Catherine, though he knew he wouldn't drink a drop. Everything in its place. Everything under control. Except nothing was. He stood at the kitchen sink longer than necessary, letting the cold water run over his wrist the way he used to do after bad pediatric calls, watching the droplets slide off his skin like they could carry the night away with them. The image of the woman in blue kept replaying behind his eyes. The way her mantle caught the strobing lights, yet somehow remained untouched by them. The impossible stillness of her posture while the world screamed around her. The absolute absence of fear on a face that had every reason to be terrified. He had spent 16 years learning to trust only what he could see, touch, measure, intubate. Tonight the highway had handed him something his hands could not hold. Catherine's footsteps were soft on the hardwood, the gentle padding of someone who had waited up too many nights to count. She didn't turn on the overhead light, only the small lamp above the stove that painted everything in warm gold. Sean felt her behind him before she spoke. You're home late, she said, voice husky with sleep and something gentler. Bad one. He nodded, still facing the sink. Roll over. Girl lived. Shouldn't have. Catherine waited. She had learned the shape of his silences the way sailors learn coastlines. He turned off the tap. His hands were shaking, just enough that he gripped the counter to hide it. There was a woman at the scene, he said finally, the words scraping out like gravel. Kneeling by the driver door. Blue cloak, white dress underneath. Hands out like she was shielding the car. face completely calm. I yelled at her twice to move, turned for half a second to call Aaron. When I looked back, she was gone. No footprints, nothing on any camera. Cops said no one was there. He laughed once, a dry, broken sound. I'm losing it, Kath. Catherine didn't answer right away. She crossed the kitchen, opened the drawer where they kept the good linens and the things too precious for everyday use, and pulled out a small painted plaster statue no longer than her hand. It had belonged to her grandmother, brought over from County Kerry in 1953, wrapped in a tea towel and prayers. She set it on the table between them without ceremony. Sean stared. The air left his lungs in a rush that felt almost like prayer. Every detail was there. The exact shade of blue that had glowed against the darkness. The way the mantle fell in soft folds across the shoulders. The position of the hands, palms forward, fingers gently apart. The face that carried every sorrow of the world and still managed to look like mercy incarnate. His knees buckled. He caught the back of a chair to stay upright. That's her, he whispered. That's exactly her. Catherine's tears were already falling, silent tracks catching the lamplight. Sean Patrick Donnelly, she said, voice trembling with something between laughter and awe. You saw Our Lady. Before we continue, share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Let's see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary have reached. And if you haven't yet joined our family, subscribe now, because here, each day, we witness the tender love and mighty power of the Mother of God. He shook his head hard enough to hurt. No, that's not. I don't believe in. I work with facts, Kath. Science. Medicine. People don't just appear and disappear. Cars don't survive that kind of impact because someone in a blue dress prays over them. His voice cracked on the last word. Catherine reached across the table and took his hands, calloused, still smelling faintly of antiseptic and rain, into hers. And yet the girl lived, she said softly. Against every fact you know. Sean stared at their joined hands as if they belonged to strangers. The statue sat between them like a small, undeniable witness. He stood so abruptly the chair scraped backward. I need air. He was out the back door before she could stop him, into the cold October night where the grass was silver with frost and his breath hung in clouds. He paced the small yard they had meant to landscape, but never found time for, hands raking through his hair, trying to force the world back into shapes he understood. If miracles were real, why hadn't one come 5 years ago when Liam's blood soaked through his gloves? If a woman in blue could shield a stranger from death, where had she been when a young father slipped away on a rainy highway while Sean begged him to stay? Inside, Catherine knelt in the kitchen, forehead against the cool table edge, whispering decades of the rosary. She had never stopped praying for the husband who had stopped believing he was worth saving. Outside, Sean stood beneath the bare branches of the maple and felt, for the first time since Liam died, the walls inside him begin to crack, letting in a light he wasn't sure he wanted but could no longer keep out. 2 months crawled by, each shift a silent duel between the man Sean had been and the man he was terrified of becoming. He functioned perfectly on the outside. Same steady hands, same clipped radio voice, same ability to walk into hell and bring people out alive. But inside, something had slipped its leash. Every call now carried a question he couldn't silence. Is she here? He found himself scanning peripheries, searching shadows, breathing deeper when the air felt suddenly sweeter, as though the city itself might exhale roses at any moment. Erin noticed the change. She never asked, but her glances lingered longer, and she started making him coffee without being asked. Catherine watched him come home earlier, sit on the porch longer, stare at the little statue on the mantel the way a man stares at a door he isn't sure he's brave enough to open. Then came the Tuesday night that finally broke him open. The call was brutal even by Denver standards. Motorcycle versus semi on I-70, rider down, no helmet cam because the helmet was now in 3 pieces on the asphalt. They arrived to a scene lit like a war zone, flares hissing, diesel bleeding across the lanes, rain mixing with blood into pink rivers that ran toward the gutter. The rider lay 5 meters from the bike, limbs at angles no human frame was designed to hold, breath coming in wet, dying rattles. Sean dropped beside him and felt the old, familiar helplessness rise like bile. Blood pressure crashing, pupils fixed, GCS 3. He worked on pure muscle memory, airway, lines, chest compressions that cracked ribs like kindling. But he knew. He always knew when the story was ending. And then, through the stench of burnt rubber and spilled fuel, came the scent of roses, fresh, impossible, overwhelming. It poured over the scene like warm water, drowning every other smell, wrapping around him so completely that for one heartbeat, he stopped compressing just to breathe it in. Aaron's voice cut through the rain. "Sean, you with me?" He blinked, came back, kept pumping. But the scent stayed, stronger now, as if an entire garden had opened beneath the interstate. The rider's chest rose on its own. A gasp, wet, ragged, but a gasp. Pressure ticked upward on the monitor. Pupils flickered, then shrank. By the time the flight medic arrived, the man was breathing shallow but steady, and the surgeons later would use the word inexplicable 3 times in their notes, in the ambulance bay afterward. Rain drumming on the metal roof. Sean stood with his forehead pressed to the cool side of the rig and let the tears come. Not the controlled kind he had allowed exactly once at Liam's funeral. These were ugly, shoulder-shaking, the kind that tear their way out after years of imprisonment. Aaron found him there, pretended not to notice the shaking, and simply leaned against the bumper beside him until he was finished. Before we continue, share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Let's see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary have reached. And if you haven't yet joined our family, subscribe now, because here, each day, we witness the tender love and mighty power of the Mother of God. That night, he told Catherine everything, not just the facts, but the fear, the anger, the guilt that had calcified around his heart since the day Liam died. He spoke until his voice gave out, until the words themselves felt like confession. She listened without interrupting, then led him to the living room where the little statue waited under the soft glow of the vigil lamp she had kept burning since the night he first described the woman in blue. Together they knelt, awkwardly at first, Sean's knees protesting the unaccustomed position, and Catherine began the Hail Mary she had prayed alone for years. Halfway through the first decade, Sean's deeper voice joined hers, rusty and trembling. But there, when they reached, "Pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death," he broke again, forehead pressed to their joined hands, and whispered the name he had not spoken aloud in 5 years. Liam. The next morning, he called Siobhan O'Connor. The conversation lasted an hour, awkward pauses, tears, laughter when 5-year-old Sophie grabbed the phone and demanded to know if Uncle Sean was coming to her birthday. He promised he would. He kept the promise. He started accepting the after-shift beers again. Started telling the rookies it was okay to puke after a bad pediatric. Started leaving the porch light on when Catherine went to evening mass. And sometimes, only sometimes, he went with her, sitting in the back pew with his arm around her shoulders, breathing in incense and candle wax and the faint, lingering scent of roses that no one else seemed to notice. He never saw the woman in the blue mantle again. He never needed to. She had already done what she came for. Reminded a man who had appointed himself God of every scene that there was a mother who never left the side of her children, even when they couldn't see her, especially when they couldn't see her. 3 months after the night the roses bloomed on spilled gasoline, Sean Patrick Donnelly stood in the kitchen of the little house on East 12th Avenue, washing breakfast dishes while the winter sun poured gold across the tile. Catherine sat on the couch with her feet tucked beneath her, reading the Sunday missal she no longer had to attend alone. The radio played low, an old Irish ballad their parents would have known, and for the first time in half a decade the silence between them felt peaceful instead of heavy. Sean dried his hands on the dish towel, turned, and caught her watching him with that soft smile she used to wear before grief moved in and refused to leave. He crossed the room, knelt in front of her the way he once knelt beside dying strangers, and rested his head in her lap. "Thank you," he said, voice rough with everything he still couldn't name. "Thank you for praying when I couldn't, for waiting when I was lost, for keeping the lamp burning for both of us." Catherine threaded her fingers through his hair the way she had on their wedding day and whispered, "She never stopped waiting either, Sean. Neither of us did." Before we continue, share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Let's see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary have reached. And if you haven't yet joined our family, subscribe now, because here, each day, we witness the tender love and mighty power of the Mother of God. The change in him was quiet, the way spring comes to the Rockies, no thunder. Just one morning the snow is thinner and the first crocus dares the light. At work he still ran calls with the same precision, but now he let the rookies see him wipe his eyes after a bad pediatric. He started a monthly breakfast for the crew at the same diner where he and Liam used to argue over who paid the tab. He hung a small medal of Our Lady of Prompt Succor on the sun visor of Unit 15. Erin teased him for 2 shifts, then quietly asked where she could get one for her own rig. One Saturday, he drove alone to the cemetery on the edge of the city where the foothills rise like a promise. He knelt at Liam's stone, brushed snow from the engraved shamrock, and spoke aloud for the first time since the funeral. "I'm sorry I shut down, brother. I thought if I stopped feeling anything, I could keep you safe in there somehow. Turns out someone else was keeping watch the whole time." He laid a single white rose against the granite. The florist had looked at him strangely when he asked for one in February, but she found it in the cooler anyway. "I brought Sophie's birthday present last week. She's got your eyes, mate, and your laugh. You'd be so proud." He stayed until the wind numbed his cheeks, then stood, made the sign of the cross he hadn't made since childhood, and walked away lighter than he had arrived. People still ask him what he saw that night on the highway. He never gives the sensational answer they want. He simply says, "I saw a mother who refuses to leave her children alone in the dark, and she stayed until I could see again." These days, when the tones drop and Unit 15 rolls out into whatever chaos Denver can throw at them, Sean no longer scans the shadows looking for proof. He knows she's there the way he knows gravity is there, unseen, steady, holding everything together whether he acknowledges it or not. Some calls still end in heartbreak. Death doesn't take holidays. But now, when he closes the eyes of someone who didn't make it, he whispers the same quiet prayer Catherine taught him. "Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death." And somehow the words feel less like surrender and more like handing the soul into safer hands than his own. Sean Patrick Donnelly, the paramedic who once learned to shut everything out, has finally learned to let everything in: grief, wonder, mercy, love, all of it carried on the faint, undying scent of roses that follows him into every ambulance, every hospital corridor, every ordinary morning when he wakes up breathing and knows, with a certainty deeper than any monitor strip, that he is not alone. Write the words "blue mantle" in the comments if this story reminded you that even on the darkest highway, even in the longest night, there is a mother who sees you, who stands guard, who will not leave until you are safe home. Let's watch those 2 words travel the world tonight and see how many hearts they reach. May Our Lady of the Highways, the one who wears the blue mantle of midnight and mercy, keep you and every soul you love wrapped close, especially when the road is long and the rain won't stop. Amen.